track this back to a particular facility, and then they'll be working backwards from that. I did talk to a friend, trying to understand the diagnostics that would be going on in Quantico now. And, I think that that will be going around the clock down in Quantico. They will be, trying to look at these 10 devices that have been collected so far and the packaging that went with them in great detail, really in a team environment where the DNA specialists will be talking to the fingerprint folks, will be talking to the firearms and tool marks folks to see who has the best opportunity to recover something valuable that may lead them to the person who built these devices, and to take the best shot with the process that they have that's going to be able to recover something. And I think that we can expect to hear some meaningful results out of those examinations probably within the next few days, because
well, let's hope
that process is not going to stop.
Let's hope. Ron, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to read some information that I've just received from the New York Police Department, has told our affiliate here in New York, WCBS, and also just to bring our viewers up to speed who may be just joining us now. The New York City Police Department says just before 8 p.m., the NYPD got a call about a suspicious item package on the third floor of the Time Warner Center. ESU responded and evacuated the second and third floors. At 8 p.m., the bomb squad was requested for the item, and the first floor is currently being evacuated. The entire building is not evacuated. So that tells us something about their level of concern. They're obviously very concerned about this situation, but not concerned enough to evacuate the entire building as they did yesterday.
I think it's important that law enforcement here, looking at these devices, if additional ones are discovered, not miscalculate. And by that I mean not say, look, 10 of them have been recovered so far. They don't look like they were ready to detonate. They don't look like they have the mechanism to be victim detonated or victim actuated. Let's lower our guard.
So that's all, you're saying that's all going into the calculus that is allowing them to remain populated, the building populated. In other words, they've decided not to evacuate the entire building because of everything you just mentioned.
I think that, and if in the scenario, let's say it's a worst case scenario, that device is packed with explosive powder. That's what we're hearing. It may be powder, it may be black powder. We don't know for sure. It may be inert. But let's say it is packed with it, a device of that size and dimension with black powder or some sort of smokeless powder. How much damage could it potentially do? Well, it's probably not going to wipe out a main column or pillar of a building. It's not going to wipe out an entire floor of the building. We have concrete above and concrete below. We don't need to evacuate the whole structure.
Right.
All we need to do is clear out a couple of floors. So I think those judgments are being made based on what they know so far.
And we do have a tweet here from the New York City Police Department. As a precaution, the NYPD is currently evaluating a pair of unattended packages at the Time Warner Center Mall. More information will be released as soon as it becomes available. So now we're hearing a pair of unattended packages. We thought at first it was a suspicious item package on the third floor. Now it appears there are two. Now, the fact that these are unattended packages, Ron, does that tell you these are different than the packages that were found in the mail?
Well, we don't know how they got there. So were they placed there through the mail and somebody internally delivered them and weren't paying attention to what's going on in the news and they're related? Or is it completely, out of a sense of somebody sees something unattended in this time, in this location in New York City, and they call 911. It's an unattended package. So we haven't heard in any sort of detail the description of the package. This may be an abundance of caution by somebody who sees a backpack or something sitting unattended, and like we are expected to do in an airport or in railway transit, hey, let somebody know about that. Let the professionals come and address it. If it's nothing, it's nothing. we've had a little minor inconvenience. If it's something, well, that's important too. So it could be totally unrelated. It could be something that was delivered a couple days ago and it's been sitting and nobody's noticed it until now.
And my producers are telling me that the sub-basement and Whole Foods are also fully evacuated. Paul Violas, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
I'd love to ask you as well what you think in a city like New York, where there's a delicate balance that needs to be struck between protecting the citizens and the tourists and all the people on the street, which of course is law enforcement's priority, but it has to also consider that this is a city that needs to keep moving, right? I mean, the traffic needs to keep moving. Business needs to keep happening. It can't be indefinitely shut down. So where do they strike that balance?
Well, that's just it. It's all about balance. And Ron brought up really the best analogy that you could possibly have, comparing it to an airport. Just to give you a brief analogy, when we saw what happened in Fort Lauderdale, that was a year or two ago, you didn't shut down the airport, you shut down a terminal. So in this particular case, and in the city of New York, the unique part about New York and other major cities is the public-private partnership that exists between the police department and with the buildings, the commercial buildings per se. For example, our commercial buildings, like the Time Warner Center, they're BOMA buildings, Building Owners Managers Association, and they work in conjunction with the police department consistently. So as that relates to training, they integrate their training in scenarios such as this, an evacuation scenario. So this is nothing new. They realize that that Time Warner Center needs to stay open, except for the areas that needs to be restricted. And it's not just that. It could be the Empire State Building. It could be the Freedom Tower. It could be any building. So there is that balance. The balance is based on what the probability of risk is, what the identified risk is, and how both groups have trained with regards to the identified threat and how to evacuate from the building expeditiously and safely, and what areas will need to be evacuated. So this is something that's well planned out,
right,
Tanya. And it really is. It's well planned out. A lot of training goes into this.
I imagine. I'm so glad I don't have to make that call, and I'm glad that the experts are making it, because there's a lot riding on their knowledge and their understanding of the situation. I will point out that we are continuing, though, to see, groups of NYPD, pouring into the building with lots and lots of equipment. I don't know what all of this equipment is. Of course, we saw the bomb squad earlier. But maybe you could explain some of this to us.
Right. You got to look. The NYPD is about 36,000 strong. It's the sixth largest standing army. It's the largest police department in the United States. So, and very well funded. So they do have equipment that most departments clearly do not. And the type of equipment that you're going to see is suppression equipment. So I'll give you an example. If there's a suspicious package at any particular building, we'll use Time Warner, and it's identified as a suspicious package, the department's first responsibility is to contain that. Now, we're talking right now explosive devices, as Ron pointed out, black powder. The difference here being is if that object, if that package appeared to have white powder or potentially an exposure to anthrax, they're going to have to shut the HVAC system for the whole building and evacuate the building, as opposed to what's going on right now. So the equipment that's going to be brought in is going to be consistent with what's being observed by first responders, then detectives, then technicians, as to what they see and what they're going to need to validate the risk before they remove the item. Because remember, and again, another great point that Ron pointed out, they're only going to evacuate where they have to. So they need to make sure they contain what the probability of risk that particular ordinance may or may not, bring to fruition to that situation. And that's the key part. So that's the equipment you're going to see brought in, so they can minimize the overall involvement for the entire area and minimize the risk and remove it safely.
And what can you tell us about the structure of a building like the Time Warner Center? You said it had steel reinforced walls so that if something happens on one floor, it won't necessarily affect another floor. Is that right?
Right. Yeah, like Time Warner, like a lot of the other buildings that have been retrofitted and modified in the post 9/11 world. Now, bearing in mind, and I'm not an engineer, so I can't speak to that, but I can tell you from building structure standpoint, these buildings are not designed to lean forward. So God forbid something were to happen, they're designed to come straight down. So that's
like the World Trade Center buildings.
Work with building engineers, right? They work with them to understand where the stress points are in the buildings. And these are the parts of the buildings that are protected more than anything else.
So that would factor into the decision right now to not evacuate all the floors of the Time Warner Center.
Correct. Absolutely. And also, too, remember, it's what they've seen, Tanya. So, and I can't emphasize this enough. Right now, we're dealing with packages that are being identified as potential explosive devices. And thank God none of them have detonated, but that's what they're looked at. We haven't seen anything been identified yet that could have been a biological agent. Now, if we see that, then I can tell you and assure you that HVAC system will shut down immediately, and they will be evacuating the building because, as we've seen, and remember post 9/11, what happened at the post office in D.C. area, just one spore of anthrax can get through that building in a matter of minutes with regards to that HVAC system. So if that happens, you'll see an entirely different protocol for evacuating the building.
Thankfully, we haven't had any more incidents with anthrax after that. Is that right? I mean,
well, we haven't had any major since that particular time frame. Thank God we haven't. But also credit to Johns Hopkins APL because they did a lot of research that provided federal law enforcement as well as state law enforcement some great education to identify and mitigate things early. So good credit to them. But no, we haven't seen anything major since that point in time.
I just want to update for our viewers who perhaps may have just joined us. A pair of suspicious packages were discovered by the NYPD. They're on the 3rd floor of the Time Warner Center. And as it now stands, those packages are being investigated. We've seen the bomb squad enter. We've seen all kinds of New York Police Department teams with various very sophisticated equipment entering the building. The sub-basement, the 1st floor, the 2nd floor, the 3rd floor have all been evacuated. That is our understanding. The rest of the building has not been evacuated, but this is clearly an ongoing situation. Ron, are you still with us?
I am.
So, Ron, you probably are seeing the same images that we are of all of this equipment entering the building. Does this tell you then that law enforcement has a handle on these packages, kind of can understand what they are, and is just trying to now detonate them safely or see if they need to be detonated?
Yeah, I have to believe by now that law enforcement knows what's been placed in these packages that are already down at Quantico, that they have an understanding of that, and that intelligence is going back to the police department. In New York Police Department, shared with the FBI, shared with the Secret Service, and the other components that are involved in the JTTF response, no matter what city. But even if that was to be the suspected explosive turned out to be inert, I think they have to respond in a muscled-up way, particularly in the Time Warner Center, particularly where there's a suspicious device around any future likely recipient. They have to do that because what if this person, let's say these first 10 devices were all inert, and he decided, hey, they dropped their guard, the 11th one is going to explode. Right. So I think until they have somebody in handcuffs, they're going to have to respond aggressively, fully, and certainly in a place where a device has been sent in the past, and that would be the Time Warner Center.
And look, we don't know exactly what the situation was here, but we heard the mayor today saying, you see something, say something, call police, so we can probably expect, at least in the near future, there will be a lot of people reporting a lot of things, some of which will pan out to not be worrisome, but it's better to report than not report, better to be safe than sorry.
That's exactly right. I think we are more likely in the coming days to see false alarms, muscled up police responses that turn out to be nothing. That's okay. That's okay. And I think the commissioner was inviting that in New York City. Hey, let's guess right. Let's not guess wrong.
Right. He did say that there is no sort of current intelligence to suggest that there is any imminent danger facing the city. But this just goes to show you that intelligence or not, anything can happen at any time.
That's very true. And we cannot foreclose the possibility that some copycat out there wants to have a little bit of fun with us and see what kind of influence he can have both on the law enforcement components and on the media. Because as Paul mentioned earlier, some of this is about commanding attention and power and the gratification of watching this response. Look what I can do. Look how I can manipulate. That may well be in this offender's head. We hear of these reports with arsonists sometimes. They light the fire and they sit back and watch the response because they like it. They've controlled that. Is that a factor here? It may well be. And look at the media coverage that this person has commanded so far.
That is so unfortunate that particular psychology of the criminal mind that feeds on the attention and the coverage that his or her acts get. I'm just wondering if Tony Cavan, who's there on the scene, is still with us. Oh, we do not have Tony any longer. Paul, I wonder what you can add to the idea that this could be a copycat or somebody that sort of is just piggybacking on all the excitement and danger that was in the air yesterday and said, hey, wouldn't it be kind of a gas if I got everybody riled up again?
First of all, I think it's highly probable. And for the same thing I'm telling you, the same things when we cover school shootings, workplace shootings, active shooters, you see in a certain period of time after that another incident because they recognize the kind of attention that the previous person got. So I think it's highly probable. But the other point, too, that Ron raised a great point as far as the notoriety here. Remember, when you look at this crime scene, and one thing I think our viewers would find interesting is the fact that right now you can expect NYPD plainclothes detectives walking through the crowds behind the tape, taking a look and just observing and recognizing, the various people that are in that crowd. Because, as Ron pointed out about an arsonist, it's highly probable that this person could be in that crowd enjoying and watching the police response.
Well, I want to just add to what you just said about this person, possibly being in the crowd. I also want to point out that there are cameras everywhere, probably in the Time Warner Center, correct? I mean, if someone assumes that they put two suspicious packages on the third floor of the Time Warner Center with no one seeing them, I think they're probably mistaken. Right,
but you look at the behavioral profile of a guy like this, believes he can hide in plain sight. So by standing in the midst of a large crowd and kind of assimilating into that area, or he's reaping enjoyment in that. He's watching everybody run around and scurrying around, all because of what he did, because of the device that he put somewhere. So,
but in terms of internal surveillance cameras in the Time Warner building, is it safe to assume that they are probably everywhere?
Yes, and I mean that's a fact, that's a certainty. Okay. But now let's take a look at this. It's October 25th. So people are walking around in coats. They have hats. People have backpacks. And if you're not looking up, the camera's going to see the top of your head. And this individual was smart enough to know that. I mean, he sent, 11 devices now, and nothing has been detonated. So he's not stupid.
If it's the same, the same, that's a big leap, though, if it's the same individual, right?
If it's the same individual, right. If it's the same individual. But, if it's not, it's several individuals. And, we still have nothing that's detonated. Right. But this individual, by placing something in Time Warner tonight, it's such a large venue. I mean, it's such a large venue that to walk inside with a coat and a hat, to place a backpack down, and to walk away, as crowded as it is, especially at this time, it's especially on a night like tonight. And it's not unlikely that a camera wouldn't pick him up on the facial recognition side.
I do just want to point out that we cannot confirm that this was a package that was sort of hand-delivered and left on the third floor. We don't know exactly how it got inside the Time Warner Center. It could have very well been something that was delivered to one of these stores through the mail as well. So we don't know for sure whether an individual actually placed these two packages inside the Time Warner Center.
And if it came through the mail, then it would just be completely consistent with everything else that we've seen in the last 30 hours or so. Right?
Exactly. So that is a little missing piece of information. A lot of missing pieces of information right now, but we're certainly keeping on this story that it continues to develop. I mean, it is not. There's no indication or signs yet that the police are wrapping up their work here.
No, and again, the thing that people need to understand, and not just in New York, and I think it's really important for everybody to understand that this is not a New York thing. This is a national thing. So it's to be expected in the days to come, and not to panic over it, that very possibly a building may require an evacuation because of a heightened level of alert, that's been implemented in building security protocols based on mail screening, and it's probable. So it's for people not to panic and just, calmly evacuate.
There could be a lot of false alarms in the days ahead, as Ron said. Ron, how long would you, Ron or Paul, whoever's still with us, how long would you expect this portion of the investigation, or if they have to detonate something or if they have to remove it from the building, how long will this process take?
Well, part of that's going to depend on how close the bomb squad is and their availability. My understanding is they have containment vessels scattered around the boroughs of New York. They certainly have bomb technicians scattered around the different boroughs of New York. Even though it's evening, it's NYPD, right? And nobody sleeps. So they're going to have coverage. It's a matter of getting through traffic, getting the right people there, assessing the package. This is not a beat cop walking up with a nightstick and poking at it saying, looks okay to me. You really want to get professionals in, and those are trained bomb technicians with the tools, the diagnostic tools, to get up there. Very often it's, to put an X-ray on it, take a look at the X-ray. The first one doesn't work. You go take another X-ray, go back to, looking at diagnostics with multiple people. This could take, I would think an hour or two until some sort of all clear is given, or they make a decision, look, let's take it out and try to render it safe. If we have any doubt that it's potentially explosive, let's get the containment vessel, walk it down, put it in on the loading dock. If they can move it, they may decide, hey, we need a robot, because, this thing is a little bit more curious to us. We're a little bit more concerned about what it might be. Let's get a robot in to do that rather than a human being in a bomb suit. So all of that and just really the transportation and getting through traffic may be the biggest delay. The diagnostics will take a little bit of time, and it could be, hey, the all clear is given, or they're hauling it out of there in the next 45 minutes.
Right. Certainly the traffic in a city like this one will come into play. What does it tell you, though, about the fact that they haven't shut down the streets and they haven't sort of, as we said earlier, evacuated the whole building, and police seem to be somewhat less concerned about the situation? What does that tell you?
Well, that's kind of the vibe that I've been getting, even while we've been on the phone, is that the police don't seem to be too amped up about this. Mm-hmm. So that tells me that they've already made some sort of preliminary assessment. They're telling each other, okay, everybody take a deep breath. Let's slow it down. Let's not get anybody hurt getting here. Right. They'll make their assessment. Presumably the initial assessment is a good assessment, and they can start letting people back in.
That's certainly good news, Ron. I mean, that's what we want to hear.
That's what we want to hear.
Absolutely. And Paul, do you have anything to add to that? I mean, is that the sense that you're getting as well, that this is something that they definitely have a handle on at this point?
It is, and I agree. Completely with Ron. That's the exclamation point. I mean, what they're doing right now is really just capping things up. You can even see, as we're watching now on the CBSN feed, you can start to see where, NYPD officers are walking out with duffel bags and things of that nature. So I agree completely with Ron. I think it's very safe to assume at this point that this is starting to get wrapped up.
All right. Well, Ron Hosko, Paul Violas, thanks to both of you for sticking with us and giving us all your insight and expertise to the situation. I want to recap for our viewers. Part of the Time Warner Center in New York City has been evacuated. Police say 2 suspicious packages were found on the 3rd floor of the building, which does house CNN's New York headquarters. We're going to take a quick break now. We'll have much more on this and the rest of the day's news in a moment. You're streaming CBSN. Stay with us. Accusations of voter suppression dominated Georgia's governor debate Tuesday. Republican candidate and current Georgia Secretary of State Brian Kemp is accused of blocking about 53,000 voter applications, most of which are from minorities. Those votes could be crucial for Democratic candidate Stacey Abrams, who's looking to be the first female black governor in U.S. history. The two candidates are neck and neck in the polls. For more on this, The Economist's Washington correspondent John Bassman joins me now on set. He's been following this issue closely. John, a pleasure to have you with us here. So, let's break this down exactly. Why is voter suppression such a big issue in this election?
Well, the bet that Stacey Abrams has made, the theory of the electorate that she's using, is a similar one to the one that Andrew Gillum is using in Florida. And that is, for the last couple of cycles, Georgia Democrats have nominated fairly unthreatening, somewhat dull candidates designed to appeal to the theoretical swing voter in the middle. That